Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and I'm doing something a little bit different right now because the video I did on spirituality and Dark Night of the Soul didn't go well because of the weather situation. We're working those things out. But what I'm doing is re-taping that and just sharing that with you, but doing it this way versus doing a live video on it. Just to keep our schedule the same as we have every Thursday at 3:30 for the lives. So two things. One is this will be, generally speaking, the full length, which is about an hour, I think. I don't know what's going to happen today because this is different. But also the other thing I'm going to start doing is a little bit do this or the lives every Thursday at 3:30 Pacific time. And then I'm going to do a synopsis or recap or a cliff notes. Haven't decided what it's called yet, but I'm going to do a shorter, maybe 8 minutes, maybe 5 minutes of what I covered, the big points, the how-tos perhaps, or the differences that are important, but maybe you don't have time or aren't interested to listen to a whole hour of me talking about whatever I'm talking about. And you just want the gist of it. So the gist is probably what we'll call it, the gist of the situation, the gist of the live calls. So that's that. And so I'll leave a link below if I don't think I can right now, but anyway, there'll be a link below to those gists, and that's pretty much it. So I guess I can start. Usually I wait when I've got the live, I wait for the chat, and people come in and say hi and all that kind of stuff. But this time it's just me talking to you. So this past month was February 2022, and my theme was spirituality. So spirituality in a lot of different ways. And in this particular one today, I'm talking about spirituality in the dark night of the soul, when it feels like, this can't be spiritual because I don't feel happy. I don't feel blissful. I don't feel connected to God. I feel disconnected. I feel like I'm lost and alone, and don't know any way out. Stan Groff talks about phases or stages in our birth process that he calls hell, no way out. And sometimes as part of this process in this human experience of growing ourselves and learning, we come into these moments that are definitely called or feel like it's hell and there's no way out. I don't know any way out of this situation. I don't know any way out of this sense of panic and aloneness and lostness. I feel powerless, helpless, and hopeless. And some people think that that's a rarity, when actually, from my experience, most of us have either gone through it or will go through it, or are working very, very hard not to go through it, because it challenges us on so many levels. Quite often, these I'm just calling them dark night of the souls. You might have another term for it, but it's when there's a loss of meaning, a crisis of meaning. Midlife crisis is a time where quite often people realize that what they've been doing in their life doesn't make sense, doesn't give their life meaning anymore. It doesn't give them a sense of fulfillment. And that might be marriage, it might be business, it might be money, it might be all kinds of different things that we thought was going to give us a sense of fulfillment, but it doesn't. And quite often that means that we've been listening to our consensus view of reality. We've been listening to our culture, our family. We've been listening to our religions, our education background. We've been listening to so much of that. And it starts to go, wait, it's not working for me. Why aren't I happy? Why aren't I fulfilled? Why aren't I feeling a sense of wonder and delight in my life? I feel yucky. I don't feel happy. I feel depressed. And when we have these moments, we start to question ourselves. There must be something wrong with me. I must be crazy. I must be doing something wrong, as opposed to going, wait, I'm having an experience that's telling me I better start listening to what's going on. So quite often these experiences come at times of a loss, like I said, loss of meaning, a loss of jobs. With the COVID situation, it's a loss of certainty. We have a potential war situation going on. So there's a potential loss of the human race. You know, there's all of these situations that show up, which has us go, wait a second, what does any of this mean? Like, what is this about? Like, how am I supposed to be with this? And it sucks. That's the official term for it. It sucks because we're in a state of potential panic, as well as all of the other things I've mentioned: lost, aloneness. We're afraid to share our perspective with other people because we're afraid they won't understand, or they'll tell us that we're wrong. And so we don't have those conversations. And quite often we isolate ourselves because we don't feel like we have anybody that we can talk to. Hang on one second, because I'm going to fix something so I can be more, where are you? I can be more, there we go. Hang on one second. There we go. Hang on. Okay. Go back. I've got my notes on my iPad over here as I'm talking to you. So I just didn't want them disappearing again and again and again. Quite often, and this is, I think, true for a lot of young people, there's a lot of suicide for very young people. I'm talking below 14 years old, that there's a lot of suicide. And there's a lot of suicide in a lot of, I'm talked about this not too long ago, but there's a lot of suicide for adolescents and all the way up, because we get to a point where we don't know how to be with the circumstances. They're just too challenging. My first dark night of the soul, and people might call it depression. I don't call it depression because I don't. I never even thought of it in terms of being depressed. I've never thought in those terms. But the first time was when I was 17, and I had an experience. I was at a ski resort with my ski club in high school, and I was sitting there watching these people dance, and I had this moment where it was like, it wasn't an epiphany per se, but it was like an epiphany to say, all these people are just here doing this until they die. And they're just filling in the time until they die. So that was this thought that showed up in my life. And had I had support, had I had a way of perceiving this in a way, but primarily if I had had support, I would have been able to work through this more quickly. But I didn't have any support. I had no one to talk to about what had happened to me. And so not only was I in this moment of the isness, in a sense that we are here and then we die from a 17-year-old perspective, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. And so in that particular moment, what I did was I just kind of, I bear and grin it, basically. I just bared through it and got through it. But there were times where I did all the things that people begin to do when they're suicidal. I stopped going to the things that mattered to me. I loved Glee Club, but I found that wasn't helping. My relationship with the Catholic Church, which wasn't good in the first place, but it was getting worse. I quit going to church. I quit going to Glee Club. I quit going to intramural sports. So I stopped doing the things that brought me joy to the degree that they did. And those are all ways that we kind of start to go down into the abyssness of it, as one of my clients calls it, the abyssness. So I stayed with it for myself. That was in 1968. There wasn't for me that level of support that's possible for other people. I didn't have an access to therapy or a spiritual guide or coaches or anything like that. So, but I managed to get myself through it, and then and get back to a sort of a normal. And then I got married and I had kids, and that filled that space for me. And I really wanted to be married, really wanted children. But I got divorced in my late 20s. But it was in my 30s that I had a second spiritual dark night of the soul. And it was when basically the context was my boyfriend at the time broke up with me. And I thought it was a really good relationship, but it turned out that it wasn't on many levels. And in that moment, and I had been a therapist, learned and trained myself to be a marriage and family therapist, and worked in Nova Scotia for a number of years. And so I had some foundation at this point for what was happening to me. But therapy doesn't give you a spiritual perspective. It gives you a therapeutic, quite often a diagnosis kind of mental illness perspective. And I wasn't trained in that perspective. I was trained in marriage and family therapy in a more transpersonal, more of a spiritual perspective. So when this happened to me and I just kind of shattered, I had what I call a shattering. I was able to have a context for it where I could hold myself differently in that process. And that relationship, the ending of that relationship was a tipping point for a lot of unmet experiences around guilt and powerlessness and hopelessness, a lot of things that I grew up with that I could never talk about. We were not allowed in most in dysfunctional families. You learn to not know what you think, feel, need, or want. So imagine, I don't know the degree to which you've experienced that, where you're not allowed to know your own thinking or feeling or needs or wants, but you can imagine that in itself would create a sense of a shattering at some point, that the strategies and all the ways that my egoic personality self said, this is how I have to be in the world, that there was a shattering because it didn't work. I was really a great person and I was doing all the right things, and this person broke up with me. And it was just a culmination of so many things that I just shattered. And I had it, like I said, I had enough wherewithal that I didn't go to a therapist. I was basically the therapist in my organization, in my community. I was like the therapist, and I didn't need a mental health worker because I wasn't sick or crazy. I was going through a process, a grief process, a major grief process. And so I knew enough that I could be in all of that and make it happen. And what I did, which was really helpful in sustaining myself, was I still worked. I still went to work, and sometimes it was a half day, but seeing clients was really important to me in my mental health and my ability to focus, my ability to be clear with myself, my ability to feel purposeful and connected. Those were really important because it was very difficult for me to feel a sense of connection in my community or with my friends because they didn't know what was going on for me. And it was really hard for them to understand. It's really hard when nobody understands what you're talking about other than I broke up with my boyfriend and it's a terrible, horrible thing. But in that breakup, that shattering happened because that took me into the hard, and I'll call it again, the abyssness of my loss of my marriage. And when I left my marriage, I left my children in the custody of their dad, because that was what they needed while I grew myself up, got my degree, got my job, those kinds of things. And all of that was very challenging to my psyche, to my being, but I never dealt with it. I was in denial. So in this moment where this boyfriend broke up with me, it wasn't just the boyfriend broke up with me. There was a shattering of all this stuff. And I was, in some ways, it was interesting because I can say I was incapable of functioning. And yet I went to work and I was very effective as a therapist with my clients. I'd come home and I walked my dog. That was another thing that was really important to me, was getting outside in nature and walking and walking and walking, and being creative. and you know, talking with people as best I could. But it was in these dark nights of the soul, we don't know what it is mostly, and every single one of us generally has our own unique experience. So for me, one of the experiences I had was I would wake up from sleep and my body was just in pain. Like it was like my cells were extracting toxic density that they'd been holding on to. And it was painful. There was nothing physically wrong. It was just the grief and the density that was coming out. So I'd wake up and it would be like painful for a number of minutes, and then it would dissipate. And when I would be doing my my creative work, I was doing some toll painting. And in those moments, I would find relief, like these moments, sparks of relief, like, oh, I'm out of it but now back in. And these processes are just, it's so hard to describe because it's all very unique and individual. I have a podcast called Spiritual Immersion, Taking the Plunge. And there's 100 podcasts that I recorded where it talks about a lot of things that I went through. And I think in what I've experienced with my clients and other people who I know have gone through similar situations, some of what I talk about is similar, but that each one of us has our own unique journey. We each have our own unique path that we're on. It's like the week before I talked about the hero's journey. And so this is part of it. This is like the caterpillar who's moving along and la, 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 life is good. And then all of a sudden he is creating, this is all part of being a caterpillar. They know what to do and they're ready to do it. And they start to form this cocoon inside this, and they're inside this cocoon and they turn into mush. And then out of that comes the butterfly. So this cocoonness is, in a sense, what happens. One of the metaphors for us doing this is we go into this state of no thingness, no awareness, no oneness. We do not know who we are, what we're doing. It's like we just feel lost. And the thinking brain of what has been our consensus view of reality and what other people have done and what other people do, it doesn't necessarily make sense when we're going through this process. None of it makes sense. And that's a really hard part because our consensus view of reality says, hey, here's the database. It's like downloading the Wikipedia of life. It's like, here's the information. It's all you need to know. And it's like, wait a minute, in this Wikipedia, you don't talk about this abyssness. You don't talk about shattering. You don't talk about it as a process, a spiritual immersion process, spiritual emergence. You don't talk about that. So where do I put this? And you could probably go on Wikipedia now and you could find that. But generally speaking, we don't think that way. We just think we're sick or crazy. And we're not. We're going through a process. And again, my perspective is that we are spiritual beings that choose to come to earth, and we choose to come in the form of these human bodies, these human experiences, to learn and grow. And so part of that learning and growing, again, is like the caterpillar having to go into a chrysalis so that being can go into another form. It's alchemy, it's transformation. And that's what's happening for us. But we don't have that language. We don't have that positive orientation, a positive orientation towards something that seems so not in alignment with religion or spirituality. Quite often we have a perspective of spirituality as being something that's we have a what's the word? It's we put a romantic spin on spirituality. If I meditate, if I pray, if I do my yoga, if I'm kind, life will be good and it'll be beautiful. And the crystals and the essence and those things you burn, incense, It's like that. There's a romance about it. This shatters that romance. And it feels like, and it's hell no way out. For a while, it feels like hell no way out. Now, there's a lot of different people in the world now that can support and empower you to go through these situations if you want to, if you want to get some help. The important thing is that you know that you're healthy, that this is a process of health. This is quite often symptoms in our bodies are signs that we want to grow in health, as opposed to, oh, we're sick and crazy. It's like, no, this is showing that your spirit is wanting to grow. It's wanting something else. It has to find the right outness, and it needs you to be open and present to this process consciously as best we can. Quite often, and I was mentioning this before, is these crises or of these dark nights of the soul, or this crisis of meaning, the crisis of spirit, quite often comes with loss of health. Quite often people who get cancer and have to go through chemo, where you're basically killing a lot of yourself in order to heal yourself, is the same kind of process of going into this place that's so uncomfortable. But because of it, you find a renewal of self, or you discover something. You disidentify with the old stuff. You start to deconstruct an old pattern or old way of being, an old way of thinking or belief system. And that's part of what happens, is like the old patterns, the old belief system doesn't work anymore. And to have enough faith in this process, or in God, or in yourself, to say, there's a way out, because there's other people who've gone through this. And if they've gone through it, I can go through it. And what did they do? And how did they do it? And finding those people, and it's not hard anymore. There's an organization called the acronym is ASSISTE, ACISTE.org. And it's the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. Now it's just, and they have a forum there where people talk about near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences, which I think I would definitely put in this dark night of the soul journey. Is definitely, though it doesn't seem it when we're in it, it's definitely a spiritually transformative experience. So there's organizations out there that can support and empower you through this. I've written a number of books, so check out my books in the description below. One of them I wrote is called I've Arrived, well, sort of. And in that, I talk about these places when I'm in the, I've gone through the spiritual immersion process, and I'm in it. And then all of a sudden I pop up and I go, oh man, I've arrived. I'm enlightened. And it's like, that lesson is like, oh yeah, no, more work to do. And so it's called I've Arrived. Well, not really. No, I've Arrived. Well, sort of. That's what it's called. I've Arrived. Well, sort of. But there are books, and there are people out there that are now can support you and empower you through the dark night of the soul processes. And again, they can look all different ways. People with Kundalini processes and kriyas and all kinds of things that are very challenging to be with. And so I say that not to scare you, but you're listening to this probably because either you know someone who's going through a dark night of the soul, you've gone through one, or you wonder if you're going through one, so you're looking for more information. And it's just part of the evolution of you. Now I've gone through three. The last dark night of the soul I went through has been what I call a spiritual immersion process. And it happened when I was 60, basically, and 60, no, 58. And I made a job change, and I thought, hooray, things are going to be like outstanding and exciting. And I was on this trajectory, and I thought, oh, give me 3 months and I'll be on Oprah, and thought it was going to be great. It's not what happened. And while I was waiting, I started being with all this panic and loss. And, I'm 58 and no, no savings and no stuff there to take care of myself. And it's like, what's going to happen? And so through this process, I went through this again, another dark night of the soul. And it was uncomfortable, not the physical uncomfortableness, but the being with the levels of truth and levels of reality and levels of connection, levels of belief systems, levels of emotional engagement that were profound. Quite often during the middle of the night, that's when I would be doing the most work, was because I'd be awake and then I'd have these thoughts or feelings and these sensations. And so I would immerse myself in those conversations and just have extraordinary, deep experiences of knowing within these belief systems. And the process was really about questioning reality, questioning beliefs, and seeing where my attachments were creating a suffering. Buddha said this a long time ago, that our attachments are what creates the suffering. He talks about desires, we shouldn't have desires, but desires is just part of life. But our attachments to our desires, our attachments to the past, our attachments to the way it's supposed to be, our attachments to our identity and our roles, that's what creates our suffering. And so more and more, I was able to be more conscious of, oh, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. And part of that as well, I developed a process for myself, which I use with clients now, where I could tether, it's called a tethering exercise, but I could see where I'm tethered to patterns. And I say that in terms of patterns of beliefs that kept me in a suffering, a stage of suffering or quality of being in suffering. And I was able to tap into that place in past life traumas that I was holding certain beliefs about myself. And it was extraordinary, first of all, extraordinary that I did that for myself, but then extraordinary that it's something that I share with my clients when they're ready or wanting that level of experience with themselves. So we think that the dark night of the soul is going to come and it's going to happen, and then it's going to be over, just like, get the caterpillar going into the chrysalis and it's going to turn into a butterfly and whoopee, life is good. And certainly life is better and better and better, because my life is now a constant engagement with this part of my life, which we call dark night of the soul, is because in a sense, all of those places we don't want to look, we've put in the darkness, the dark side, if you will. If you've got a room and part of it's in the light and part of it's in the shadow or the dark, and all that stuff we don't want to look at, all that stuff we don't want to deal with, we put it in the dark side of our room, so we don't have to look at it, we can ignore it. But at some point, because we're spiritual beings coming here into human experiences to learn and grow, that means we have to go into those places, the attic or the basements or wherever we store stuff, and start to look at things honestly and with clarity and with a knowing. And when we do that, it becomes an ongoing, conscious, aware process of growing ourselves into greater levels of I'll say enlightenment. So we are enlightened, and we grow ourselves constantly to greater degrees of enlightenment. So when we talk about a dark night of the soul, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to do it. And we maybe go and drink, or we go and eat, or we go and talk to people, or we go Facebooking or social media, Instagram, whatever we can do to distract ourselves. But when things happen that are bigger than us, like COVID, like job loss, like tumors and cancers and lesions, like the loss of a child or the loss of a loved one, that it's a 2x4 upside the head where you cannot ignore this. And I talk about this in the book Self-Empowerment 101 as well, that when we ignore things, eventually there'll be a 2x4 upside the head to wake us up and go, wait, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming. You might have been with a partner that for a very long time kept telling you something's not right, or you've got to change, or whatever that is, or people that you love that say things to you like, this isn't working. But you don't listen. And then all of a sudden you get a 2x4 upside the head and you go, where did that come from? How did that happen? And another thing I talk about that reminds me of this is there's a chapter in Self-Empowerment 101 called The Wisdom of No Escape. So for me, at least in this moment, this time where I was in this stage, every single one of them, but mostly when I was in my 30s and my 50s, going through that, there was no way out. There's ways to distract ourselves, which is very helpful because it's hard to be with it 24/7. But there's no way out, is that you have to go through. And this is true for a lot of people who are wanting to recover from their addictions of smoking or drugs or alcohol or food. Is we don't want to go through the process. We don't want to go through it. Just give us a pill, bless us, go do something magical or mystical, so I don't have to be with the discomfort of pulling myself or moving myself through this process. This is not about fixing you. This is about you learning who you are inside. It's about cultivating that relationship with yourself that you've been ignoring for a long time. It's certainly what's true for me, as there was so much that I was ignoring and couldn't have dealt with before for whatever reason. But I needed to be with myself here in this place and cultivate that relationship of honest truth and an expression of the truth of that. And because there was no way out, that was just where I had to be. And I think this is true in a very positive thing for people who have to go through the chemo and the radiation and the surgery. Not that I encourage it, but part of it is the ramification is there's no way out. It's hell. And so if you can be conscious with yourself and start to develop a compassionate relationship with yourself through that, then you start to grow. The story of Jonah in the whale. Jonah was in the belly of the whale, and that's that hell no way out place. That's that dark night of the soul, where he was in the belly of the whale as an analogy or metaphor, and there was no way out. But once he got what he got it, in a sense, there's this alchemy, this transformational process that happens, and he was released. And that's what we can take ourselves through. That's the intention of a dark night of the soul, is we can be released from this. We release ourselves from this. This is not something or someone is going to release us. This is you empowering yourself, supporting and empowering yourself through this process, through this release. So my job as a transformational coach, spiritual / transformational coach, is to empower and support you and steward you through this process. A lot of people think transformational coaching is about, I'm going to tell you how to do it and you're going to go do it and you're going to have a magical life. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, no, it doesn't work that way. I haven't seen it work that way for anybody. It can work a little bit, but it's not sustainable. A professor I knew at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology worked on an oncology ward in a hospital. I think it was in New Mexico. And this person came in and said, I have this ability to heal everybody. And I want to be able to do this in your ward. Will you let me do this? And for some reason, somehow the ward said yes. The ward, the organization and who supported the ward said yes. So this person does their thing. All of the people are healed. they all go home. But within a very short period of time, they started coming back. Their cancers came back. And it's because they haven't created the sustainability of the well-being, self-love, if you will, or the spiritual wholeness, or the ability to be the fulfillment of the expression of your essential nature, your divine self, that because of that, the cancer came back. And I found that story to be really, really important, because we think, I'll just use the magic crystals or the magic tea or the magic whatever, and that's going to heal me. But, or chemo or radiation or surgery, that's going to heal me. But what's really going to heal you is the alignment of you with yourself, listening truly to your essential nature, listening to your inner self, your inner child, your inner innocence, your inner knowing. Being willing to be with the stuff that sucks, the places where you feel powerless, helpless, hopeless, the places where it's like in the 12-step program, part of a number of the steps are about creating an inventory of what's your part. Where do you fail yourself? Where do you remain? Where do you hold the guilt? Where are you guilty? Where did you hurt other people? And quite often people will go, no, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything bad. When it's like, no, we got to kind of get real here. We got to own our stuff. We have to be accountable. We have to be responsible for who we are and what shows up in our life. And the more I do that, the easier my life becomes, the more peaceful my life becomes, the more joyful my life becomes. I rarely had moments of joy in my life before I started this process. So that's part of why I did the podcast Spiritual Immersion, because it's like when we voluntarily engage in this exploration of who we are as a spiritual being in this human physical body-ish, we create a different relationship with ourselves without having to go through a crisis and a major loss. And that doesn't mean major loss and crisis won't happen. It just means we don't have to do that in order to get well-being and fulfillment and be the fullest expression of our divine self. So in a sense, that's the intention, I believe, of what a dark night of the soul is it's time to go and explore those closets or those attics or those basements where we just keep putting stuff. A friend of mine, when he was working for a long time, he would just say, if he was stressed or something, he said, I'm just giving it to the cancer. I'm just giving it to the cancer. And lo and behold, within a few years, he had a nice big tumor in his throat. And he went to a naturopath, and he like two weeks before, no, it was like actually a couple of days before the surgery where he was going to go into surgery, he met somebody who said, hey, I want you to talk to this naturopath. And in that moment, he shifted his whole reality and started on a raw food diet and healed his cancer. And he worked with me in terms of a lot of coaching stuff and issues where he was holding stuff. He did that, but and he worked with me. He's been in recovery, all kinds of things that he was doing to continue to grow himself. And he's one of the most generous people and one of the most, he's very wealthy, and he's very generous, and he's very much love, and he's very healthy. So there's all kinds of ways that this process happens for us. Let me see if there's a couple more things I want to say. One of the most challenging things that I want to say is that it's really hard to stay in faith. In the 12-step program, the first three, I think for me, the first three steps are very, very important. Step number one is admitting when I'm powerless. And if I had an image once of Jesus, I was lying on the floor and Jesus his foot was on my head. This is an image I'm having, or it's a kind of a visiony thing. And it's that point of going, I'm powerless in this moment, and admitting I'm powerless in this moment, and having faith that Jesus is with me, And whether it's Jesus or Buddha or Archangel Michael or whatever those supports are for you, I knew that Jesus was saying, hey, give up. Stop pretending you have all the answers. Stop pretending you're in control. Just get over it. Get over yourself. And that's what a lot of the dark night of the soul is we have to admit when we're powerless, helpless, and powerless, helpless, and hopeless. The first step one, and this is my articulation, it's not necessarily the quote, but admitting when we are powerless over our addictions or over our and being a control freak is an addiction, or being angry or whatever it is, but all of those places where we deny our powerlessness, we need help because our life has become unmanageable. Step two is admitting that there's a higher power that can grow me to a place of safety and sanity. And again, these are my words. And step number three is I turn it over. I turn over that insanity. I turn over where I want to be in control. I just turn it over. So having faith in something greater than yourself, even when you're in the midst of the insanity of a dark night of the soul, is part of the process. Very, very challenging and very difficult. Another piece I want to say is it's very uncomfortable. As I mentioned, sometimes it's painful. Sometimes my teeth hurt, or sometimes I get a pain in my head, or sometimes it's my foot. Sometimes my body itches. There's all kinds of ways that your body is releasing toxicities that it's been holding energetically at the cellular level, the cellular memory. And so your body is releasing these things. And sometimes you think you're sick. You might think you have the flu, or you might think you have a brain tumor, or you might have some allergies. And if you're concerned about those things, it's really important to see your health practitioner or your dentist or whatever it is. I've changed my diet significantly to help some of the processes that are caused by the foods I'm eating. But a lot of this is just your body is detoxing. And if anybody's gone through a detox process, you know how uncomfortable it is. So it's an uncomfortable process. And when you know that, it doesn't make it easier. It just makes you a little more sane. Like, oh yeah, Rosie said it's going to be uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, it's uncomfortable sometimes. Sometimes there's joy that comes from just out of this world. It just comes joy in this blissful moment. And you go, wow, there it is. Yeah, okay. And then maybe go back into the work again. Who knows? Everybody's got their own process. And so it's just a matter of really honoring your process, honoring your way. And if you need support, you can Google, like I said, or go to assist.org or reach out to me. I don't, aside from the work that I do, I don't have any other organizations that I'm involved with to support that, but there are spiritual emergence processes and organizations that can be helpful, and just check it out. So the things I want to make sure I mention when I did this live last week, and one of the things I didn't mention, which was really important, is one of the reasons I'm redoing this. When you're going through a process like this, it's really important to do a number of things. One is drink a lot of water. One is to rest. You might go, hey, this isn't a big deal. I'm not sick. I'm just going through this thing. Why should I take time away from work? Or why should I go away from my family, as in either a retreat or, rest? This isn't a big deal, but this is a very big deal. And our consensus view of reality does not honor the degree to which we are working on all these different levels, these spiritual levels, these multidimensional metaphysical levels that we don't even recognize, but we're working on these levels all the time. There's conversations about parallel lives, so that we're, I'm having the life I'm having with you right now, but apparently there's all these other me's doing other things that affect me here, right here. And so all of that can be very exhausting and toxifying. So we need to rest. So drinking a lot of water, resting, Eating well, you know what that's about for you. I need to be outside in nature. So exercise is really important. And I need to do that outside. And I really encourage you to be outside at least an hour a day. And you go, how is that possible? I live in Chicago, or, you know, downtown or whatever it is, but find a way to be outside some portion of the day in a park or near a tree or with flowers. And if you can't get outside, bring some nature into you. But nature is exquisitely healing and so important to our well-being. I have my dog Gracie, she's huge in terms of a support for me. I've also brought in fish. I love fish. So I have 3 different small aquariums, and I love my fish and little shrimp. And I have some ponds outside where I've got some koi and some other goldfish. So those things are very important to my well-being. They nurture my soul. So nurturing your soul in that way is really, really important. The one thing I'd forgotten to mention was the degree to which, for me, a contemplation time is really important. Some people might call it meditation. Meditation doesn't work for me. But this ability to contemplate, and what that means for me is, first of all, I do a clearing. I use a pendulum to do a clearing process. So I'm clearing away energies and discordance and disturbances in my field. And you can go on YouTube and find different people who do that. My teacher was Eric Dowsett, D-O-W-S-E-T, Eric Dowsett. And he's got a channel on YouTube. And that's who I trained with and learned how to do a clearing, energy clearing for myself. So I do that 4 or 5 times a day, because we have these energies. It's like bacteria that enter our fields and they hang out, and some are bigger than others, and they don't want to have us be happy and spiritual. They want us to be, you know, they're like parasites sometimes. Or what's that other thing where they're sort of a synthesis, but some of these are parasitic and they kind of feed off us, and we don't want that, and it doesn't work. So every morning, and probably 3 or 4 times a day, and maybe once or twice through the night, when I go to bed, I'll clear myself. And then if I'm awake, can't go to sleep, sometimes I'll clear myself and I go right to sleep. So the clearing is really important. And then I'll read the book Oneness or Course in Miracles or something like that. And again, I douse to say, because I don't trust in my intuition in this case, because sometimes I can trick myself, and some people can say, well, dowsing can trick yourself. I get that, but this is what works for me. You find what works for you. And it's like tarot cards or whatever it is, where you get some wisdom, where you're open to receiving some wisdom. And so I use the Oneness book, the book called Oneness by Rasha, or Course in Miracles. And so it'll tell me what to read, what page. It'll say 255. And I'll read and I'll feel that place where this is important to me. This resonates. There's a resonance. If nothing resonates with me, then I'll douse again and go, I don't think there's something here. It'll take me to another page. So sometimes those discordants or those energies get in there and they kind of want to play with you. So I make sure, and I listen, and I listen for that place of resonance. And then I listen in that resonance for what's mine? What's the learning here for me? What do I need to attend to? What is this telling me? What do I not want to see? What am I scared to pay attention to? So in that process, there's this contemplative, reflective time that's been really important for me. And this started when I was 58, well, that was 12 years ago, but that's when it started, where I would get my cup of coffee or my cup of tea and go sit down and do this process. And where I wouldn't make time for it before, it's been crucial, and it's been critical for my well-being to do this every single day. And I would say 99 times out of 100, I will do it because it's so important to my well-being. And it's how I stay connected with myself, and it's how I stay connected to the wisdom that is always supporting me and always teaching me. And it's been a really, really wonderful and important part of my life. So it's one of those things that I require of people to say, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you walking? Not just going to the gym, because you need time away from your electronics and all that electrical energy. You need time away from it. So even if you're walking outside, don't take your cell phone. Or if you do, I take mine just in case I fall down or something like that. It's not on, but I have it with me just for security or safety. But stay off your phone and stay present with nature, because that's part of the healing process. So drink water, rest, be in nature, work, exercise, do some sort of reflective process every day, and breathe, and bring creativity into your life. I paint, which is really important to me. I do acrylic painting. I knit, which is really important to me. And playing board games or creative. I wrote 13 of the 14 books in those last 12 years. I think that's accurate. Something like that. I'll say 10. Let's, as an exaggeration, potentially. But I've written 10 books out of 14 through that process. So that was a really important creative outlet for me. And it was something that was inspired. I didn't say, here's what I'm going to write. They were like downloads for me. And that was so important to this healing process and this wholeness process. So creativity is really important. So reflection, breathing, walking, nature, work, keep working if you can, or some sort of way that you feel that productivity and connection with people. Get support or connection or fellowship so that you have a community of people that you can count on, or a coach or a therapist or spiritual guide or your minister or somebody that can be there for you in that way. It might be your partner, it might be your a best friend. So I think that's pretty much it. It's such an important knowing that this exists and that it's not a romantic adventure. It's not a walk in the park. It can be for some people, but the truth is, it really is a place of revelations, and it's what I call exquisitely excruciating sometimes. But the profoundness of that relationship with yourself that begins to grow and bud and mature is just extraordinary. I can't tell you enough. And the fulfillment that comes out of that, in your capacity to live without fear or live with less fear and more joy, it's really wonderful. I have yet to say, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you find it of value, please share it with other people. It's really important, I think, that people know this information. If you find what I'm saying valuable, this is basically what I do. And so please subscribe and hit the notification bell as well, and you will be notified every time I do one of these. The other thing I want to say is I put together a boot camp. It's called Inward Bound Boot Camp for Self-Transformation. And it's a 20 videos, about 10 minutes each. And it takes you through this process of a basic training in transformation, in self-transformation. And it's a really, really great opportunity for you to begin to explore some of what's necessary for you to get to know you a little bit better and find that ability to be more in integrity and responsibility to this self here. So check it out. The link is below. All right. Thanks very much for being here. Bye for now.